Welcome, everyone. Today's discussion is inspired by an insightful article published in Arab News, written by Dr. Turki Faisal Al-Rasheed, a distinguished Saudi academic, author, and expert in public policy and leadership development. The article, titled Local Culture, Vital to Effective Leadership in the Gulf, explores how deep respect for local traditions, values, and cultural identity plays a crucial role in shaping strong and effective leadership across the Gulf region. Let's dive in and uncover the key lessons from Dr. Al-Rasheed's perspective.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're taking your sources and really questioning that idea of strategic leadership being some kind of universal model.
Yeah, the one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. We're focusing on a specific, really complex region, the Arabian Peninsula, to understand what successful public sector leadership actually involves there.
It's a crucial conversation because, when you look at the Gulf, the standard Western leadership theories don't always capture the dynamism we're seeing.
Right.
What your sources are pointing to, I think, is that the key traits aren't about following a rigid playbook. It's more about adaptability, flexibility.
Being able to pivot.
Precisely. And seizing opportunities, whether they're very local, regional, or tied into global economic shifts.
Okay. So we're going to unpack how history, culture, and global forces all kind of mesh together to define what works in Gulf leadership. Let's start with that historical shadow. You really can't talk about governance globally without bumping into the legacy of colonialism, can you?
No, it's unavoidable.
The sources argue pretty strongly that Western colonialism didn't just rule, it actively imposed its own systems and values. Why is that history still so relevant for Gulf leadership today?
Well, it's about the dominant narrative that took hold globally. Colonial powers, for centuries, set up administrative structures based on their own models. And in doing that, they often actively devalued or ignored local contexts, local knowledge, local ways of doing things, even local leadership styles.
So the successful leader profile from, say, London or Paris became the benchmark, the sort of exportable standard.
That's pretty much it. It created this pervasive idea that to be seen as modern or effective, especially after independence, nations felt they needed to adopt these external frameworks.
Right.
And the sources also mentioned sometimes that colonial competition itself led to a kind of aggressive nationalism as different powers jockeyed for influence. The whole global idea of leadership got tilted towards a very specific Western perspective.
Which means, for leaders in the Arabian Peninsula now, it's kind of a dual challenge. Running the country day to day, but also consciously working against or maybe redefining that inherited model.
Exactly. It makes it imperative, as the sources say, to revisit and redefine strategic leadership specifically for this region. Relying on an old blueprint from elsewhere just doesn't make strategic sense anymore.
Okay, so if the old Western models are insufficient, what are the essential building blocks for strategic success within the Gulf context? Your sources argue against lumping all Arab leaders together.
Yeah, that's a really important point. They highlight specific complexities.
And what are they?
It boils down to three core, deeply interconnected elements: religion, tribal affiliation, and economic growth.
So not just background factors, but active ingredients in strategy.
Absolutely fundamental. Leaders have to weave these into pretty much every major decision. They're not just side notes, they're the bedrock.
And there's this fascinating quote the sources use to show how deep these roots go, referencing Ardashir, founder of the Sasanian Empire, millennia ago.
Right. The king remains by religion, and the tax is the pillar of the king. It's incredibly succinct.
What does it really capture for us today?
It captures this long-standing understanding of power, still very resonant. It links the ruler's legitimacy. The king remains by religion, meaning alignment with core societal, spiritual values directly to the state's stability and function. The tax is the pillar, meaning sound economic management, resource distribution.
So translating that to now, economic plans, big development projects, they can't just be about numbers on a page. They need to connect with religious values and tribal structures.
That's the tightrope walk.
Yeah.
Leaders have to navigate, for instance, the natural tension between, say, localized tribal loyalties, which are often built on history and consensus, and the need for centralized, often globalized, national economic strategy.
How do they bridge that?
Well, successful leaders often use mechanisms like shura, consultative governance, to integrate these pillars. The aim is to ensure that economic progress feels like it serves the community and its values, not just some abstract national target. Ignoring those pillars, that's building on sand.
Understanding those foundations seems critical then. So how did leaders historically actually use these pillars in practice? The sources give us a really interesting case study, someone who maybe learned the hard way, Al-Rasheed.
Yes, Dr. Al-Rasheed's great-grandfather, a key figure in the first Saudi state. His story is almost a perfect illustration of getting the internal balance right,
Okay.
but missing the bigger external picture. Jaber's leadership was apparently very effective at integrating the religious, tribal, and economic factors needed for the state's immediate survival. Internally, things were relatively stable.
What was the strategic miss?
The sources point to a lack of foresight about the wider regional and international stage. Specifically, the dynamics around the Hijaz with Mecca and Medina and the Ottoman Empire's claim to religious legitimacy as the caliphate.
Ah, so a much bigger power dynamic.
Exactly. The Hijaz held immense religious significance. The Ottomans, even if geographically distant, wielded enormous religious and political clout across the Muslim world because of their caliphate claim. Challenging them directly, as the early Saudi state did, wasn't just a political move. It was seen by many as a challenge to the established religious order.
So Job mastered the internal game, but didn't fully calculate the geopolitical and religious weight of taking on the Ottomans.
That seems to be the analysis. That external blind spot led to major setbacks for that first state. It highlights the need to manage both internal cohesion and external realities.
That leap from just internal survival to mastering the global stage, that's huge. And we see that evolution personified later with King Abdulaziz.
Let's turn to a brief introduction of King Abdulaziz Al Saud, the visionary founder of modern Saudi Arabia. In 1932, he united the Arabian Peninsula under one nation, guided by remarkable leadership, courage, and diplomacy. He laid the strong foundations of a stable and prosperous kingdom, and his legacy continues to shape the nation's progress and inspire generations to come.
Oh, absolutely. King Abdulaziz is presented as a master of adaptability. He clearly absorbed the lessons from earlier periods. He moved beyond just internal balancing. He skillfully navigated the incredibly complex geopolitics of the World War era. He understood that long-term survival meant positioning the new nation on the world map, forging strategic alliances, gaining international recognition.
So that was the crucial strategic pivot from internal focus to external diplomacy and positioning.
Yes, understanding that you couldn't just exist in isolation. You had to engage with and strategically manage the wider world.
And fast forwarding to today, the sources suggest we see a continuation of this deliberate balancing act with the current leadership, King Salman and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
Right.
Let's turn to a brief introduction of King Salman and Crown Mohammed bin Salman. In the heart of Arabia, a new era rises. Under the steady leadership of King Salman bin Abdulaziz, the kingdom strengthens its unity, heritage, and presence on the world stage. Beside him, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman drives a bold vision for tomorrow, transforming the nation through innovation, youth empowerment, and economic growth. Together, they shape a powerful journey that bridges tradition with limitless ambition, guiding Saudi Arabia toward a brighter future.
The focus described is heavily on driving internal reform, modernization, economic diversification, Vision 2030 being the prime example.
But at the same time,
Maintaining a careful, strategic distance from international conflicts that don't directly serve core national interests.
Yeah.
It's not isolation, but a selective engagement.
Is that a risk? Does keeping distance mean potentially being sidelined?
Well, that's the strategic calculation, isn't it? The potential upside is that by prioritizing internal strength and avoiding getting bogged down in external disputes, you arguably preserve diplomatic energy and capital for issues that really matter to national interests.
Yeah.
It could actually increase leverage in some ways. It's presented as a very conscious posture, internal focus coupled with geopolitical prudence.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly to this huge force, globalization. We often think of it economically. You know, the world is one big market, technology connecting everything.
Right, dominated by the tech-advanced nations.
But the cultural impact is maybe even more profound, isn't it?
It really is. Globalization throws up this massive paradox. On one side, yes, there's the risk of cultural homogenization, the McDonaldization effect, maybe, where global brands and media can dilute local identities.
Well, on the other side.
On the other, it offers amazing opportunities for cultural dialogue, for sharing local perspectives, for projecting a nation's own culture and values globally in ways that weren't possible before.
The sources really hammer home this idea of needing a a synthesis of local wisdom and global best practices. That seems to be the tightrope walk for leaders now.
That's the core strategic challenge identified. You have to engage globally to prosper economically and intellectually, but you can't let that engagement erase your own cultural identity, your own foundational values.
So strategic leadership has to actively protect and promote local culture while also bringing in the best global ideas for things like tech, education, governance.
Exactly. And this ties directly into a really crucial distinction the sources make: the difference between mutual respect in international partnerships and reliance.
Explain that. Why is that distinction so vital?
It goes back again to King Abdulaziz. The point made is that while he welcomed foreign expertise, say, for agriculture development, he insisted it had to be collaboration based on mutual respect.
Not just dependence.
Not dependence or reliance. Because if you become entirely reliant on external systems, external experts, you don't build up your own internal capacity, your own intellectual capital, your own civil service expertise.
Which ultimately weakens your strategic independence.
Over the long term, absolutely. Mutual respect implies partnership, knowledge sharing, building up local talent through the collaboration. Reliance can lead to a hollowing out of internal capabilities.
Which connects to the current push we see, mentioned in the sources, for reinvesting heavily in local Saudi expertise within the government and beyond.
Yes, it's about cultivating that internal intellectual capital, ensuring that the nation can steer its own course, drawing on global knowledge but not being beholden to it.
So the strategic leader is almost like an ecosystem manager, drawing in global resources, but making sure the local soil, the culture, the values, the people get stronger, not depleted by that process.
That's a good way to put it, ensuring that growth ultimately serves and strengthens the core identity rather than undermining it. Hashtag tag outro.
So wrapping this up, the big takeaway from our deep dive today seems clear. Effective strategic leadership, at least in the Arabian Peninsula, isn't about applying some generic Western management formula.
Not at all.
It's this really intricate dance between deep history, core cultural values, and the constantly shifting realities of the global landscape.
And the sources strongly suggest the most successful models are always those that genuinely reflect the aspirations and values of the people they lead.
Yeah. Leaders there are juggling this huge internal transformation agenda while navigating a very complex world stage, building up that internal expertise, while carefully choosing how and when to leverage globalization.
It's a massive undertaking.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. Given this need for synthesis, blending local wisdom with global best practice, where's the toughest balancing act for leaders today? Is it deciding precisely which global practice fits and which local tradition absolutely must be preserved? Or is the harder challenge constantly ensuring that every international collaboration stays firmly in the realm of mutual respect and never ever drifts into passive reliance? Something to consider in your own strategic thinking this week.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.